You watch the documentary on a Tuesday night. Two guys standing in empty apartments looking peaceful and enlightened. Their countertops were bare. Their closets held maybe 15 items. They seemed genuinely happy in a way that felt connected to all that empty space. So you started. You downloaded the checklist. You watched the follow-up videos. You began counting your possessions because someone online said, knowing your exact number was the first step toward freedom. 3 months later, your home looked different, but your life didn't feel better. It felt more anxious. You were mentally cataloging everything you owned, feeling guilty about a third spatula, arguing with your partner about whether you really needed that many towels. The promise was peace. What you got was a new and exhausting way to judge yourself. Here's the part that rarely gets discussed. Minimalism has a marketing problem. Not because the core idea is flawed, but because the loudest voices teaching it have turned a philosophy into a product. And like any product, it's been simplified, packaged, and sold in ways that prioritize appeal over accuracy. The advice sounds clean and confident. It fits on a poster. It looks great as a caption under a photo of an empty room. But clean advice and useful advice are not the same thing. This video covers 10 pieces of minimalist wisdom that sound right, but play out wrong and what to think about instead if you actually want a home and a life that feel manageable. The first piece of advice that misleads people: go paperless and digitize everything. The idea is that physical paper creates clutter, and clutter creates stress. So scanning every document and shredding the originals is an obvious win. Fewer filing cabinets, cleaner surfaces, everything searchable on your phone. But going fully paperless introduces problems that minimalist content rarely mentions. Digital organization requires maintenance that never ends. Those scanned files need naming conventions, folder structures, backup systems, and regular attention to prevent digital clutter from replacing the physical kind. Most people who digitize everything end up with thousands of unsorted files they can never find when they actually need them. Some documents genuinely need to exist on paper. Certain legal records, original signatures, passports, vital records. The advice to digitize everything leads people to shred things. They later discover they needed an original form. And here's the uncomfortable truth. A simple filing box with a dozen labeled folders, sitting in a closet, taking up 2 cubic feet of space, is often more functional than any digital system. You can find what you need in seconds. It requires 0 electricity, 0 subscriptions, 0 technical skill. It just works. What actually helps is keeping paper where paper makes sense, and going digital where digital makes sense. The goal is finding things when you need them, not eliminating a specific material from your home. The second piece of advice that misleads people: replace all your possessions with their most minimal version. Own 1 pot instead of 5, 1 towel per person, 1 plate per family member. The idea is that having the bare minimum forces you to wash immediately, stay organized, and never accumulate excess. In practice, this creates a life organized entirely around maintenance. When you own 1 pot, every meal requires washing that pot before you can cook again. When you own 1 towel, laundry becomes urgent rather than routine. When you have exactly enough plates for your family, a single unexpected guest means someone eats off a cutting board. Minimalism was supposed to free up mental energy. Owning so little that daily logistics become a puzzle does the opposite. You spend more time thinking about household management, not less. The dishwasher runs half empty 3 times a day instead of full once. You're hand washing constantly. Your schedule revolves around keeping your tiny inventory clean and available. What actually helps is owning a reasonable quantity that lets your household run smoothly without constant intervention. For most families, that means enough dishes to fill a dishwasher load, enough towels to last between laundry days, and enough cookware to prepare a normal meal without doing dishes between courses. Efficiency isn't about minimum count. It's about minimum friction. The third piece of advice that misleads people: quality over quantity, always. This gets repeated like a commandment. Stop buying cheap things. Invest in 1 perfect version. Pay more, buy less, end up ahead. The logic is appealing, but it collapses in several common scenarios. Quality items often cost 5 to 10 times more than adequate alternatives. When minimalist content tells a young person starting out to buy the $200 pan, instead of the $30 pan, it ignores that $170 difference entirely. For someone on a tight budget, a $30 pan that works fine for 3 years is a better decision than a $200 pan that works beautifully, but means skipping groceries. Quality also doesn't mean durability in every category. A $15 t-shirt might last just as long as a $60 t-shirt. If you're wearing it to mow the lawn or paint walls, context determines whether quality matters. Buying premium everything regardless of use case isn't intentional. It's just a different flavor of overconsumption. The advice also assumes you know exactly what you want. Buying one perfect chef's knife makes sense if you know which knife suits your grip, your cutting style, and the food you cook most. For someone just learning to cook, buying an expensive knife they might not even prefer is worse than trying a few affordable ones and discovering what works. What actually helps is matching your investment to the item's role in your life. Spend more on things you use daily and that genuinely improve with quality. Spend less on things that serve temporary, rough, or uncertain purposes. This isn't about being cheap, it's about being accurate. The fourth piece of advice that misleads people: a clear desk means a clear mind. Productivity minimalism insists that your workspace should contain nothing except what you're currently using. Everything else goes in drawers, closets, out of sight. The clear desk becomes proof of a clear mind. But research on this is genuinely mixed. Some people think better with relevant materials visible. A designer might want inspiration pinned to their wall. A writer might want reference books within arm's reach. A student might work better with notes spread across their desk rather than filed away. The clear desk advice assumes everyone's brain works the same way. Visual thinkers often need to see their work. People managing multiple projects sometimes need physical reminders of what's pending. The act of putting everything away and taking it back out creates transitions that break focus rather than enabling it. There's also a difference between messy and cluttered. A desk with active project materials on it isn't cluttered. It's in use. A desk buried under junk mail, empty cups, and things that don't belong there is cluttered. These require different solutions. What actually helps is distinguishing between active mess and passive accumulation. If the things on your desk are things you're working with, leave them. If they're things that landed there because you didn't put them away, deal with those. Your workspace should support how you actually think, not how a photograph suggests you should think. The fifth piece of advice that misleads people: delete apps and unsubscribe from everything. Digital minimalism tells you to remove social media, unsubscribe from all email lists, delete any app you haven't used in a week. The clean phone screen becomes the digital equivalent of the empty countertop. But wholesale digital purging ignores that some of these tools serve real functions in people's actual lives. Social media is how some people maintain long-distance friendships, find community around health conditions, and stay connected to family. Telling a military spouse to delete Facebook because it's clutter ignores that it might be their primary lifeline to support networks. Email newsletters might be how someone stays current in their industry. An app used once a month might be the one that tracks a medical condition or manages a shared custody schedule. The advice to delete aggressively treats all digital tools as equally disposable, when they aren't. What actually helps is auditing based on value rather than frequency. Some apps deserve daily use, some deserve monthly use, some deserve to sit there waiting until you need them twice a year. The test isn't how often you open it. The test is whether your life works better with it available. The sixth piece of advice that misleads people: sentimental items are just guilt keeping you attached to the past. Minimalist content treats sentimentality as a weakness to overcome. That box of your grandmother's letters, your child's first drawings, the ticket stubs from early dates with your partner, these get framed as emotional clutter holding you hostage. But sentimental items serve real psychological functions. They're physical connections to identity, to people who matter, to experiences that shaped who you are. Memory is imperfect. Physical objects anchor memories that would otherwise fade entirely. A photo on a phone isn't the same as the actual object your mother held in her hands. Yes, people sometimes keep too many sentimental items. Boxes they never open, rooms dedicated to the past, at the expense of the present. That's worth examining. But the minimalist response of treating all sentimental attachment as irrational goes too far in the other direction. Humans aren't robots optimizing storage space. Emotional connections to objects are normal and healthy. What actually helps is curating sentimental items rather than eliminating them. Keep the things that genuinely connect you to something meaningful. Let go of items you're keeping out of obligation rather than love. But reject the framing that says emotional attachment to physical objects is a problem to solve. It's a feature of being human, not a bug to fix. The seventh piece of advice that misleads people: meal prep everything and own minimal kitchen equipment. Minimalist kitchen advice says you need one knife, one cutting board, one pan, and a meal prep routine that eliminates daily cooking decisions. Sunday afternoon becomes your weekly kitchen marathon, and the rest of the week you reheat. This works for people who enjoy eating the same meals repeatedly, and who live alone or with someone who shares their preferences. For most households, it falls apart. Kids want variety. Partners have different tastes. Dietary needs shift. The Tuesday version of Sunday's meal prep tastes like a Tuesday version of Sunday's meal prep. and by Thursday, people are ordering takeout. Minimal kitchen equipment also assumes minimal cooking complexity. If you enjoy cooking, which is one of the most common hobbies on earth, limiting your tools limits your range. A single pan can't do everything. Telling someone who loves making bread that they don't need a stand mixer is like telling a guitarist they don't need an amp. What actually helps is organizing your kitchen around how you actually cook, not around a minimalist ideal of how cooking should work. Keep the tools you use. If you own a waffle maker and your family eats waffles every weekend, that waffle maker isn't clutter, it's earning its space. The 8th piece of advice that misleads people: say no to every gift and tell people you don't want things. Minimalists are encouraged to tell friends and family to stop giving physical gifts. Request experiences instead, or nothing at all. This advice completely ignores the social dimension of gift giving. For many people in many cultures, physical gifts are expressions of love and connection. Telling your mother-in-law to stop buying birthday presents for your children isn't minimalism. It's a social grenade. The advice assumes that your minimalist preferences outweigh other people's desire to express care in their preferred way. It puts your organizational philosophy above your relationships. Most people who try this approach end up creating tension, hurt feelings, and awkward conversations that cost more emotional energy than the gifts themselves ever would. What actually helps is receiving gifts graciously and making thoughtful decisions about them later. If something doesn't serve you, quietly pass it along. If someone asks what you'd prefer, share your preferences honestly. But don't turn gift occasions into philosophical lectures about consumption. The 9th piece of advice that misleads people: your hobby is too equipment heavy, find a simpler one. Minimalist content sometimes suggests that hobbies requiring lots of gear are inherently problematic. Photography with multiple lenses, fishing with tackle boxes, sewing with fabric collections, cycling with maintenance equipment. These are framed as consumerism disguised as passion. This misunderstands what hobbies are for. Hobbies are supposed to bring joy, challenge, community, and meaning. If someone finds those things through woodworking, and woodworking requires tools, the tools are serving the highest possible purpose. They're enabling a life well lived. Telling someone to replace their gear-intensive hobby with walking or journaling, because those require fewer possessions, is telling them to have less joy, so their closet looks better. The equipment isn't the problem. Unused equipment might be. Gear that sits in the garage for years, untouched, deserves evaluation. But gear that gets used regularly is among the most justified stuff a person can own. What actually helps is evaluating hobby equipment based on engagement, not volume. A garage full of well-used cycling gear belonging to someone who rides 3 times a week is better justified than a single journal belonging to someone who hasn't written in it since January. The 10th piece of advice that misleads people: if you were truly content, you wouldn't want more things. This is the most insidious minimalist idea because it frames normal human desire as a character flaw. Wanting a nicer couch isn't discontentment. Wanting a bigger dining table because you started hosting friends isn't materialism. Wanting tools that make your work easier isn't moral weakness. Desire for improvement is healthy. The entire trajectory of human progress runs on wanting things to be better than they currently are. Minimalism that pathologizes all wanting creates people who feel guilty every time they notice something they'd like to have. That guilt doesn't produce contentment. It produces anxiety wearing a mask of virtue. True contentment isn't the absence of desire. It's the ability to desire without desperation. It's wanting a nicer kitchen without believing your happiness depends on it. It's noticing a beautiful jacket without feeling compelled to buy it immediately. The distinction between healthy desire and compulsive consumption is important. Collapsing them into the same category helps no one. What actually helps is normalizing desire while building the skill of evaluating it. You can want things and also choose not to acquire them. You can want things and choose to acquire them thoughtfully. The goal is conscious choice, not suppressed wanting. These 10 pieces of advice share a common flaw. They prioritize the appearance of simplicity over the reality of a functioning life. They optimize for the version of your life that looks good in a blog post, rather than the version that actually works on a rainy Wednesday, when the kids are sick and the dishwasher is broken. Real simplicity isn't photogenic. It's a junk drawer that's organized enough that you can find the tape. It's a closet with more clothes than a minimalist would approve of, but every item gets worn. It's a kitchen with gadgets that would horrify a decluttering consultant, but every gadget earns its space because someone in the family uses it and loves it. The people I know who live genuinely simple, unburdened lives didn't get there by following rules from the internet. They got there by paying attention to what weighs on them and what lifts them up. They kept the stuff that helps and released the stuff that doesn't, and they didn't need a formula to know the difference. They just practice noticing. That noticing is a skill, and it connects directly to how you handle money, time, relationships, and every other finite resource you manage. The ability to distinguish between what actually serves you and what just seems like it should is the foundational skill underneath every good decision you make. I made a full breakdown of how to build that skill across every area of your finances. How to see through the marketing, whether it's selling you a product or selling you on the idea of owning less. How to evaluate what genuinely adds to your life and what just adds to your mental load. If this video helped you see minimalist advice more clearly, that video will help you apply the same clarity to your money, your spending, and your systems for managing both. Because minimalism and personal finance have the same destination, a life where your resources, your money, your time, your space, your energy serve you instead of the other way around. The person drowning in possessions and the person suffering in an empty apartment are both experiencing the same problem from different directions. They've let a system dictate their choices instead of letting their actual life inform their decisions. You don't owe anyone a sparse apartment. You don't owe anyone an empty counter. You don't owe anyone a number that fits in a headline. You owe yourself a home that works, a budget that works, and the confidence to ignore advice that makes your life harder. No matter how popular it is, the best version of your space isn't the one with the least in it. It's the one where everything in it has a reason to be there, and you know what that reason is,